Before we begin, I just want to make it clear that, in case the title didn't make it obvious, this video will contain spoilers for Warframe's story. This includes both the new war itself and all the events leading up to it. I also mentioned one or two things that came out after, but nothing that was not revealed in the promotion for those quests. Anyway, please enjoy. Hello! So Warframe is a fun video game, but it's not a game I can universally recommend. It's best to think of it less like a traditional first-person shooter and more like Diablo or Path of Exile. A lot of emphasis is placed on making builds and playstyles, customizing your guns and your character to work together before using that customized suite of tools to just absolutely destroy enemies. Honestly, I need to make a whole video at some point about what Warframe is and isn't, but that's a subject for another day. No, what I want to focus on today is narrative. Warframe's narrative ambitions have risen over the past few years, going from threadbare attempts to get the player to play missions to massively important cutscenes and gameplay-changing plot points. And to be clear, I think that's a good thing. Narrative is a great way to get new players invested, and invested players thinking and caring about the game even if they're not actively playing it. Why do you think I've been playing Catboy Dress-Up Simulator for 10 years now? However, this does raise a rather important question. Is the story actually good? Is the plot interesting to follow? Are the characters well written and compelling? Does the story make any interesting statements worth analyzing? Just because a narrative exists doesn't mean it's put together well, and critical analysis of Warframe's narrative is pretty thin on the ground. So let's take this seriously. If Warframe wants to have serious narrative elements, let's examine them critically. Is Warframe's story actually good? Unfortunately, a major difficulty in doing that is that Warframe's story is, long. As with any live service game, more and more elements are added over time, and beyond a certain point it becomes unwieldy to talk about because you either need to massively over-summarize to the point of meaninglessness, or make a video that's several hours long. So for today, let's just analyze one important quest from it, that being The New War, the big cinematic end to the first era of the game. Given its importance to the overall story, I think it warrants a close examination. So let's get started. Our story kicks off with several perspective swaps, as we see several sides of the Sentient invasion, and honestly, I think this is really cool. A lot of stories employ these kinds of techniques to show the scale of a major event, but Warframes goes one step further. We don't just see each character, we play for a while from their perspective, and they each have unique, interesting gameplay. Warframe, as a game, is willing to commit to making specific gameplay experiences like this that enhance the story, and I really appreciate it. These scenes are more than just flavor though. Each of the major narrative sequences here is meant to drive home how poorly the invasion is going, and they do so by getting us invested in the character and then effectively killing them off. Even though Call does live, these scenes are meant to be lethal. I mean, you cannot watch this scene and tell me that the implication is that Call made it out of here fine. If I did have to nitpick these scenes, I would say it's a little disappointing that the Call and Viso sequences are so similar. Both are low-ranking recruits of an enemy faction who initially follow the orders of a superior, but slowly learn to value the things that they personally care about before dying. It feels very, we need to get you to care about this character in 5 minutes, which works once, but when two nearly identical sequences are placed back to back, it starts to wear a little thin. However, that is more than made up for by the end of the sequence. We are forced to watch as legacy character Teshin dies right in front of us, followed by the reprogrammed weapon turned surrogate mother to the protagonist Lotus get cast into the void, before even the main character dies. Teshin's death, Lotus's death, and the loss of the player character all hit home really well, and the forced relog is the cherry on top. Like I said, mixing gameplay and story to make cool moments. When we log back in, we get a speech from Ballas, our main villain, talking about how he controls everything, and we transition to our new player character. I'm a massive fan of how in medias res this intro is. At this moment in our story, we don't need specific answers to who this is and what they want. They don't like Ballas, and they want their identity covered up. That's all we need to know to get on board for now, and the mystery gives me something to chew on while I play through these sections. The sharp difference between this character, the Drifter, and your previous gameplay style while playing as the Operator is also extremely pronounced. You feel that loss and uncertainty because of how different this gameplay style is, compared to what the player is usually used to in this point in Warframe. Warframe does technically have stealth missions, but they are only stealth missions in the loosest possible sense. Stealth only matters in a small fraction of the full mission runtime, and even if you do get spotted, you can normally just blitz to the end and be fine. This mission isn't like that. I've seen a ton of people play this segment of the game, and almost all of them play it like a stealth mission because the game is so clear and it's telegraphing. You don't have any of your usual powers, no shields, your identity is concealed, you have a long gun reload and a smoke bomb to help with stealth. The game is very clearly telegraphing to you that you are not as strong as you once were, and that creates an extremely potent disconnect with the gameplay of most of the rest of the game, and it's great. I am a huge fan of how this is done. Also, I want to take a moment to talk about the dialogue in this section. It's quite nice, maybe a little bit on the Marvel every sentence must contain a quip side of things, but it's got personality to it. The jokes generally land for me, and the player character and the person on the walkie-talkie have good chemistry. It's not the deepest thing in the world, but at least gets me to like the characters. Sneaking into the facility, we have a neat little bit of wordless exposition and reinforcement. To dramatically oversimplify, stories generally have two ways to give the audience information: telling it to us or showing it to us. Telling is the most direct method. It's when a character explains something to the audience. Think about all the instances where a character fiddles with something they don't understand, then another character walks over and explains to them how to use it. It's a really effective tool to communicate ideas. However, it can also be really boring if done incorrectly. Exposition like this is just a character telling you information. If you care about that information, it can be really interesting, but if you don't, it's extremely agonizing. Beyond that, a character has to, have a reason to give us this information. If one war general is explaining to another war general what war is and who they're fighting, then it's like, why? Why do you need to explain this? You're only explaining this for the benefit of the invisible audience who you don't know and who doesn't exist. I mean, thanks for being inclusive, but it's a little... And see, this is a health orb. When I pick it up, I heal. Writers do have another option, however, and it's the one that's generally preferred if harder to pull off. That is showing. Here's an example. Our player character is sneaking around in the shadows as they watch this old man get a machine stuck to his face. After he does, he switches from a very pained expression to a very relaxed expression. They also immediately sell out the player character, someone who has been helping these people since the minute they arrived. Seeing all that, the obvious conclusion is that it's some sort of mind control device. However, it is more complicated than that. Ballas actually does tell the player what these things are, they're called the Veils, and how they work explicitly here, during the Teshin fight. However, and I feel like I'm not alone in this, it took me until a second playthrough to realize what this line meant, because the first time I saw it, I was very distracted by the fight itself. That means that if you didn't catch this line, this moment works as a good introduction to the Veils, but if you did catch the line, this serves as a good reminder without taking up a bunch of space. It's a really clever little moment I just wanted to point out. After we get spotted, we have a brief combat encounter, basically a test of the knowledge we've acquired up to this point, and then the Archon shows up. We don't know what these things are at this point, but given the way everyone's been describing them, it's pretty clear that they are powerful. The whole encounter flips on its head, and what was once a stealth mission becomes a panicked escape sequence as we try to escape from this thing. This sequence also lands really well, but this time from contrast. The entire mission up to this point has been quiet. Even if you get into combat, the combat is very small scale. It's tense. Then this escape happens and it's loud and bombastic with enemies everywhere, loud music, panicked battle. It means it all stands out that much more because it's in such sharp contrast to what came before. It effectively and quickly establishes the Archon, whatever it is, as being extremely powerful and scary. After we return to the ship, we get our first look at the Drifter and their companion, Ordis. We also see that they have the body of the Lotus, who died during the opening scene during a rather pointed conversation with Ballas. This is the part where a lot of questions start cropping up. It's clear that the Drifter is somehow related to the Operator. They both have the same face and voice. This is the Operator's old ship, and Ordis is the Operator's old companion, so they are very clearly related somehow, but how is a complete mystery. Same thing with the Lotus's body. The last time we saw it, it was falling headfirst into the void, so clearly something happened between now and then. What that is, though, we have basically no idea. For now, I'm fine with that. The game doesn't need to spell everything out, but I'm hoping that by the end we can give satisfying and emotional answers to these questions.
What the hell?
No, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. Hold on, we're not there yet. Thus begins the next mission. Here we get a few things. For one, we get more world building and a deeper understanding of how powerful the Empire is. This whole sequence is great, playing an inverse of the theme that played when you first entered this area. The civilians' focus on working together to overcome adversity turned into dedication to Ballas. It's great, it's such a sharp contrast that it really helps reinforce these things. Second, we have another stealth mission, and it's even more enforced than last time. While the last mission lets you get by without stealth if you don't want to, this one's even harder on it, killing you if you slip up. This puts even more pressure on the player, once again reminding them that they are not the strong Tenno that they played as. It's a great way of making the villains feel threatening without making them feel cheap or overexposed in the story. Third, it gives us more details about the Veil. A mind control device that gives you whatever you want isn't exactly new, but I like it as an extension of a villain influenced so much by his past. I'm going to talk more about Ballas near the end, so I'm going to save an in-depth discussion for then, but for now, all that's important is that the Veils match him. They are a great extension of his themes and his villainy. Once we sneak through the spaceport and commandeer a vessel, we can slip past Ballas' blockade and get into Hun Hao's lair. It's been a while since we've seen the guy, and this is a great reincorporation of a previous character. I really like a character who is a villain being forced to take a good hard look at themselves, and this works really well for that. The stealth mission and forced violence you've done up to this point make the contrast between the player and Hun Hao sharp, and it means that the protagonist actually has a leg to stand on when they criticize Hun Hao, and that forces Hun Hao to change. I particularly like the inclusion at the end of the question of Lotus remaining the same. There's a chance that the Lotus will never be the same again, and even then, the Drifter still wants to save her. Put a pin in this moment, we're gonna circle back to it. Hun Hao gives us Nataruk, and with it, a change in gameplay. With Nataruk, all the previous stealth sections are over. We don't need to hide anymore. You can almost immediately feel the change in power as you get the bow, as once difficult enemies die to your arrows. It's great. Once you get back to the ship, you get your first flashback. There are a couple of these, and I'm just going to cover all of them now. These flashbacks show the origins of the previous player character known as the Operator. This is the Zeramin, the ship that is going to try and carry settlers to a new galaxy, and instead end up in the void, forcing the kids on board to make a deal with the devil, also known as the Man in the Wall, to survive the onslaught of monsters. This is the first and only time we see this sequence, and it's honestly great and probably the highlight of the quest in my opinion. The pre-tragedy scenes have a somewhat calm air about them that I enjoy, and they effectively manage to work an exposition about future plot developments while building dread for the inevitable tragedy. When we see that tragedy happen, it has a real impact because we just got to experience the height of what this place was like before it all came crashing down. The destruction, the screams, the panic from everyone, it hits really well, and the Man in the Wall is effectively extremely creepy. It's an extremely effective window into possibly the most important moment in the entire story. With a bow in hand, we can now have the option of tackling the Archons in any order. Because you tackle them in any order, and spoilers, you don't get to complete whatever mission you do last, this section has relatively little actual narrative material. The major story sections happen before and after each mission, with the mission having only a bit of meaningful dialogue in them. that being Hun Hao arguing with his son, Erra. This is Erra. He's a villain, and he's the guy who fought Teshin earlier, and he isn't really relevant right now, but I need you to know who he is so that when he shows up later, you recognize him. Okay, cool, thank you. After defeating each Archon, we bring their core back to the Lotus, who consumes it to regain some of her power. The first time we do it, she reacts violently, lashing out at us before falling back into unconsciousness, which surely means that if we give her a second one, it'll be fine. Yeah, no, she immediately tries to kill you. This culminates in her killing Ordis. Don't worry, he gets better. And then something happens. I've watched the sequence a few times, and all I can say is that somehow getting choked out by the Lotus gives us the ability to use void magic by connecting with the operator somehow. And oh look, the operator is back now. Look, I'm sure they will explain it later, but at least at the moment, this is very confusing. Seeing us as the operator again, the Lotus resolves not to fight us, but to instead go fight Ballas, and flies off. So okay, up to this point, I have heaped a lot of praise onto the story, and I genuinely think that the story is very good. I even like this Ballas cutscene, where we get to see his facade as the cool, calm Emperor snap as he loses himself in petty grudges. Everything up to this moment has been really good, but there's a specific, exact moment where I need to flip things over to criticism. You ready?
Gather the fleet. She is coming to us. What's left?
Why are we on the Zariman? Look, I am the last person to complain about plot holes. I am generally extremely forgiving when stuff isn't explained properly or only alluded to because I frankly just don't care that much. But that ability has a limit, and this is way over that limit. The Zariman is a massively critical plot location. It's arguably the single most important location in the entire game, and it just kind of appears with no warning. The last time I checked, the ship had been lost in the void, so it's incredibly jarring for it to just be here now. And for the record, I have played Angels of the Zariman. I do know that they retroactively gave an explanation for why the ship was here, but it's important to remember that that came out later, and a story shouldn't need supplemental post-mortem material for it to make sense. That leads me to believe that this is supposed to be some sort of metaphor or dream sequence, but there's absolutely zero lead-in to suggest that. There's even a clip of the ship traveling to the Zariman, which is the same as the start of literally every other mission in the game, and I don't think any of those are dream sequences. I think this sequence is meant to be a dream sequence, but regardless of whether it is or isn't, it is coming out of absolutely nowhere with no setup, through one loading screen. I also know I previously praised the story for not immediately spelling out the Drifter's origins and motivations. Isn't this just the same thing? Unfortunately, it's different, and it mostly comes down to clarity. Even if we didn't know who the Drifter was, it was easy to tell what they wanted and how they fit into the story. The Zariman, however, is so poorly introduced I needed to spend multiple paragraphs determining if it was a dream sequence or not. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about it, how it's supposed to fit into the story, what emotions it's supposed to evoke in me. It's just here now, and I'm left wondering why. Even more damningly, however, is the fact I don't even know how the characters feel about it. It isn't just some abandoned ship, it's the source of nightmares, the place where it all began. You would think that the operator would have some feelings about this, and the idea of an emotionally scarred character returning to the place that scarred them to find the power to save a loved one is extremely compelling and emotionally potent. But that's not what this is, because the operator has shockingly little dialogue about this. In fact, this is the sum total of the dialogue about the situation that they're in.
Still works. Hello?
The game doesn't draw that line of trauma at all. It doesn't explore the emotions of the situation in any way. I have no access to the operator's interior world because they're just kinda here. Is the operator feeling scared about the creatures here? Sad about the lives lost? Angry at the injustice? Do they have any emotions whatsoever? The goal could be to have a more self-insert character, letting the player fill in those gaps, but the operator is not that. Partially because they have very defined responses to a lot of events before and after this, and partially because the choice that's coming up hinges on the operator being a significant enough character to have meaningful distinctions from other characters. Speaking of, let's get to that choice.
What the hell?
It's at this point that the Drifter explains who they are. They're basically an alternate universe version of the protagonist who didn't make a deal with the Man in the Wall for magic powers, and because the operator is back now, I guess, they both can't exist at the same time. After this point, the player is asked who they want to continue playing as. Now, this is an idea with a lot of potential. Having two different main characters based on the different choices they made at a pivotal moment in their lives is very cool, and having the player basically pick which of the two is canon could lead to a very, very cool moment. This isn't that, however, because these two people are not equals in any way, shape, or form. One of them has been the protagonist for the past multiple years of storytelling. They have a concrete and detailed backstory that has been slowly and painstakingly built. They have connections with every major character. The player knows them, knows their story, and have built an emotional connection with them. The other is the intern who showed up roughly 2 hours ago. We don't know their backstory beyond superficial details, we haven't had time to learn anything deeper about their character, and they have no meaningful connection to anyone except Ordis and Lotus. The Lotus connection is also tenuous at best, because given the fact that the Drifter was never a Tenno, the Lotus cannot be a parental figure to them at all. That leaves the Lotus as, at best, the parental figure of a friend, which isn't a particularly close emotional connection to hinge the entire finale of a story on rescuing her. That ultimately makes the choice very one-sided in terms of narrative. I should also point out that yes, I am aware the Duviri paradox exists. That is the quest that came out to explain the Drifter's backstory, and I think it's fairly alright. However, the quest didn't come out until 2 full years after most of the player base had made this choice for the first time, and moreover, it didn't do much to make them equal to the operator. They have a bit more personality, but they don't have any specific goals, nor connections to the other characters besides the ghost of Teshin and a few ghostly lines in the Lotus. They still feel like the lesser of two protagonists. Now, I'm sympathetic to why this choice was proposed in the first place. Letting the player play as a more adult character is a good thing. I'm all for more customization options. I would absolutely go for that if it was just a cosmetic option. But it isn't. In making it a plot point, you've overcomplicated what could be very simple. On the other hand, going in and making this a powerful emotional beat could have been very good. They do that very successfully later in the quest, and I would argue that's one of the major highlights of the quest. The scene is trying to be that, but it fails because, as previously discussed, our choices aren't equal, and even more damningly, we aren't given any emotional investment in this choice. Neither the Drifter nor the operator has any meaningful dialogue about this choice. There's no moment where we understand how they're processing it. The Drifter doesn't even seem to care that much. They just kind of calmly explain what's going on and then sit back and wait for the player to make a choice. This choice could have been a deeply emotional moment or a cool cosmetic unlock, but it tries to be both and in the process succeeds at neither. If it's supposed to be just a cosmetic, the game puts a weirdly large amount of lore, emphasis, and focus on it, spending a lot of time building up the mystery and working very hard to point out the fact that the Drifter is a different character than the operator. If it's meant to be an emotional moment, why the lack of emotions from basically all parties involved except confusion? Why is the Drifter so underdeveloped as a character versus the operator? It's very unfortunately fumbled. Once you select your protagonist, we begin our final mission to stop Ballas. This starts as a return to form, first a stealth mission where you have no clip on, and second, the combat ascent through the tower to get back into being a Tenno. This segment is here to help you feel back in the saddle after all the time spent in low-power Drifter combat, and for that purpose it works just fine. One moment I really like from this section is right at the end. You've learned that there's supposedly a mythical spirit that lives inside the tower, but your current goal right now is to board one of Ballas' ships that's docked near the tower. As we're about to board, however, suddenly it starts taking off. What are we gonna do?
Let them defile no more.
Operator, I may be detecting something unusual. Should I focus scan?
Won't be necessary, Ordis.
While this is technically a Deus Ex Machina, it doesn't really matter because the problem it solves is so insubstantial, and it serves as a great reminder that there are things in the setting that are still a mystery to us. It's a neat little scene. From here, the gameplay is mostly doing combat encounters. Sometimes it's Warframe combat encounters, sometimes it's ship combat encounters, and sometimes it's necromech combat encounters. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's fine. They don't matter. It's fine. I'm not going to be commenting much on the gameplay past this point. It's basically just generic Warframe gameplay that doesn't really impact the story. During this process, we try to stop the Lotus from hunting down Ballas. She's still weak, traumatized, and manipulatable by Ballas, and needs at least another Archon shard to be ready, but she refuses to stop her hunt. This is partially because Ballas is currently planning to use his fancy warship to blow up the sun, and use that to move to Tau and restart the Orcan Empire, which is bad. But a significant part of the reason is because she's really pissed. We also meet up with Erra, remember him? He switched sides and tells us, hey, Ballas is going to manipulate the Lotus and blow up the sun, and then dies.
Understood.
Wow. Well, he died as he lived, being irrelevant. Seriously, what the hell was their plan with him? They built him up in multiple quests before this and he was going to be big bad, and then they just do nothing with him and he dies? Wild. Utterly wild. Well, let's not spend any more time on him than the quest did. We also encountered the last Archon, the one of the three that we didn't fight earlier. Fight it, kill it, and get the last Archon shard to give to the Lotus. Unfortunately, arriving in Ballas' throne room, he steals the Archon shard from us, and the fight begins. The fight is multi-phase, the first being a mind control Lotus phase, then a proper fight with Ballas, during all of which Ballas is just being the absolute worst person imaginable. Here are some of my favorite lines.
You had to have a child. And with an open heart, I gave you this. And my reward? Being left to watch as all your love, my love, poured into the bottomless well of this abominable child. Pitiful, broken thing. A puppet accusing her maker of a lack of substance, was it? My vision was only ever comprehensible to myself. My ambition beyond the grasp of people. Thus, I have always been alone.
This isn't true of all villains, but I think you could fit a large majority of villains into this Punnett square, and Ballas slots beautifully down here. His combination of aggressive grandstanding and pathetic mewling that he didn't get fair treatment makes him very effectively hateable. He's awful, I love it. Anyway, as the fight progresses, Ballas stabs the Lotus, and it seems like he's about to win, when, aha, we use Ballas' tech against him, which shows him what he wants to see, which is his dead wife Margulis. This allows the Lotus to get close enough to drain the life from him and restore herself to full power. The main villain is defeated, and the day is saved. Fortunately for everyone, the Lotus manages to fend him off, at least for now. With the danger past, we bring the Lotus back home, and here we make an extremely significant choice. The Lotus has been through several phases of her existence. First, a sentient war machine Nata. Second, a replacement of Margulis for the Tenno and for Ballas. Third, the leader of the Tenno in the modern era as the Lotus. While she is all three, we get to decide who among them is the most dominant going forward, and I love it. This is a great example of what the Drifter operator choice could have been. People have been asking for cosmetics for the Lotus for a long time, and this adds to that system while also giving us an extremely impactful, meaningful choice. All of these options have history behind them, and I could see any of them being passionately argued as the correct choice. This is a masterful moment that takes what could have been a simple cosmetic choice and elevates it by adding emotional context and a meaningful decision. This choice is also interesting for another reason, and that's the theme. Thematic analysis has kind of fallen by the wayside recently, mostly because I think a lot of people are introduced to it in terrible high school classes where you need to suffer through books you don't like and perform rote analysis. It sucks and it's awful, but it's also not a good example. Because here's the thing, themes aren't just random things that are included just to make your high school teacher happy. They help to enhance the experience by granting more meaning than just pure text. The Sacrifice quest is a great example of this. Sacrifice delves into the origins of Warframes, who are basically tortured people who were turned into mindless machines to be used as weapons. However, they were uncontrollable until the Tenno came along, and the quest makes it clear that it isn't any void magic that allows the Tenno to control the Warframes. It's their ability to feel empathy, understanding, and compassion with them. That's something Ballas and the broader Orokin society fail to understand time and time again. From the sentience to the Warframes to the Tenno, they fail over and over to see these people as anything but tools, and in so doing, fail again and again. The Tenno, however, can empathize with each other and the Warframes, not just because they're kind, but because they too have trauma. They are both victims in this society, and that gives them the ability to empathize, understand, and work together, and in so doing, become worthy and deserving to wield the powers they do. The quest is short and sweet and focuses on delivering that message as clearly and directly as it can, which is why it's one of my favorite quests in the game. So, with that in mind, what meaning can we draw from the New War? Well, the biggest theme here is control. Ballas wants control of everything, the whole solar system, and even when he controls 99% of it, he's still angry because he doesn't have control of all of it. He hates the Tenno because he cannot control them, and sees them as responsible for him losing control of his wife. And when he realizes he can't control all of it, he decides to just blow it all up and try to start again. Lotus also tries to control the Tenno, trying to convince them to stop chasing her. However, if they had done that, the day would have been lost. It's only by refusing to be controlled and refusing to control others that the day is saved. You can also connect this to this Hunhow line, but that's a bit shakier.
I understand.
Another way you could look at it is through the lens of focusing on the past. Ballas specifically describes himself as an Orokin, calling himself
Last of my kind.
And Erra is trying to fulfill the ancient sentient dream of conquering the solar system. There's also this motif of resurrecting the dead, with both the Lotus and the Archons being people pulled back from beyond the grave. However, the player specifically isn't seeking things from the past. They specifically, explicitly, don't care if the Lotus has changed from her past self. They just want to right the wrongs that have been committed. It's also crucial to Ballas' undoing in the end, because his obsession with reclaiming Margulis is what the Veil latches onto immediately, and it's what gets him killed. Obsessing about the past only leads to more harm. I think a more interesting, but potentially less cohesive theme is identity. Each character who cares about the Lotus cares about her because of one facet of her identity. Ballas cares about her only as his wife and object of affection, and refuses to see her as anything else. Erra thinks of her as Nata, the war machine, and describes the Lotus as,
"Do you think there's a shred of Lotus left in Nata? All this time, it's been dying. Eternal scorched from its rotting core.
And later says,
Either way, she'll soon be returned to us, and this time as Nata, purged of Tenno lies and human weakness.
it's only the player who sees them for what they are, with that previous Hanha line. They're not looking for their Lotus back. They're willing to save her despite realizing that she will never be the same again. These themes also tie more cleanly into that drifter-operator thing. Both of them are two different identities to this one person. Neither of them is correct. However, while I think this theme is overall more interesting, I think the narrative cares a lot less about it. Because, to my mind, the obvious conclusion to that theme is, hey, nobody has one identity. She isn't the Lotus, or Nata, or Margulis, she's all three, and each is a part of her. And neither the Drifter nor the Operator is the one true version of this person. They are both true, and both matter. The game even has a mechanic to allow you to change between the two at any time, almost like they're both equally important. Unfortunately, this quest specifically is obsessed with making you choose between which is the proper version of the protagonist and then which is the most important part of the Lotus. That kinda goes against what this theme is trying to do, which is rather unfortunate. That being said, this is by no means complete. I highly encourage you to go and rewatch the quest and see if you can get something new out of it. Because here's the thing, themes aren't like math. There isn't one specific solution you need to look for. If you can find dialogue to support your theme, then it's valid, has meaning, is worth discussing, and hopefully lets you look at the story through a new lens. And hey, if you like it enough, put it in the comments, discuss it with others what you think about it. And that's it for The New War. Now to answer the title question, is it good? My answer is yes, it's good, but it could have been better. While some strong emotional moments land, many moments go under or over-explained, leading to a story that ends up coming short of its full potential. It's good, but it could have been better and more impactful. Fortunately, that's most media, frankly, so I think it's in good company in that regard. I hope this video helped you come to a new appreciation of this quest, both the good and the bad. Thank you for watching.